Do you know, have you heard the memory of the water? Who has heard the memory of the water? Who has heard the memory of the water? Please. Okay. Thank you. Who knows who brought this idea? What was the name of the doctor who brought this idea? Only one person knows. Do you know Benveniste experiment? Benveniste made an experiment in which he said certain things that actually he said that if you give a high potency, you can cause structural changes in living organisms. So he made an experiment, and he said he took the poison from the bees and give it to cells, and there was a degranulation of basophils. And then he took a potency beyond the Avogadro number, and he put this, and he said, I found that degranulation of basophils is happening under this high potency. The story was heard by the world, and most of the homeopaths, even today, they don't know what is all about that story. So I want to tell you the real story. What is the real story? The real story is that in 1988, in Temple University of United States, the biggest university in Philadelphia in the United States actually, invited 25 professors of medicine and different kinds of professors, not only medicine, physics, biochemistry, etc., 25 in a discussion group in which they talked about the frontiers of science. This was the theme. And the Temple University had invited these people to discuss. I was also invited in the main group for the discussion. So Benveniste came and spoke about his experiment. He said, I found something entirely beyond fantasy, entirely new. It's beyond the frontiers of science. Why? Because I did this experiment and I found out that a high potency containing not one molecule of the real remedy, that means poison, had the same effect as the poison itself. So 25 people are there, 2 of them Nobel Prizes, etc., and all professors in their specialty, but no one was a homeopath. I was the only one. I understood what he said. I said, oh my God. I said, I raised my hand. All these people, they stayed with open mouth, you know. He says, is that possible? What he says, is that possible? I said, wait a moment. I don't think that this experiment is correct. The moment I pronounce this word, it comes out with such violence, you know. He says, you cannot, blah, blah, blah. I stepped back and I said, forget it. I don't want to fight here. I just want to say my opinion, where nobody heard my opinion. But outside circle, there were several scientists observing. One of them was a professor of immunology in the Jerusalem University. Zvi Bentwich was his name, whom I knew before because we have exchanged ideas about homeopathy. And after the presentation was finished, in which presentation, I must tell you, Benveniste asked these people who were present to exercise their influence upon Nature, a scientific magazine, the most high scientific magazine, Nature is called, to publish this paper. So Zvi Bentwich is outside, he's hearing all that, he's hearing my reaction. He comes to me, he says, George, come, tell me why you had objections. I said, it's not possible this to happen. And I explained the reason. I will explain to you also. He said, I understand what you say, but I am the one in our laboratory in Jerusalem. We were trying to confirm this experiment, and we were not able to confirm it. I said, sure, because this cannot happen. What he says is false, entirely false. Cannot happen. So he says, it's good that we discussed because I will withdraw from this experiment. So he withdrew from the experiment. But in the meantime, New York Times, in the first page, there was the experiment. The memory of the water. Benveniste found out that the water has memory and that homeopathy is correct because it acts, etc., etc. I said, oh my God. Then I called Zvi and I said, it's going to backfire. What he says is going to backfire. And what happened? Nature said, okay, I will publish your paper, but I don't believe it. So therefore, I publish it under the condition that I will make a committee of 3 scientists to come to your, in Paris, to your laboratory and show them the degranulation of basophils under the microscope. Benveniste agreed, and the paper was published in Nature. And soon after, Nature sent 3 people, scientists, and what they thought maybe they will do some underhand manipulation, so we have to send, together with these 3 scientists, a magician who knows all the tricks, Mr. Randi the magician. So they go there, they go to his laboratory, and of course, they could not find anything. They could not find anything, so he could not prove. So there was a big scandal. He lost his professorship, he lost his laboratory, he lost his clients. He was one of the best allergologists. He was reduced to nothing, because in science, if you make such a mistake, in scientific world, you can forget about existing anymore. They reduce you to pieces. So later on, I invited in Alonissos all the scientists. They were doing some research, and I told them, if you make a research on homeopathy, please have with you as an advisor somebody who knows homeopathy, so you don't make such mistakes. Homeopathy, the potency, cannot create the same effect as the poison. Because if that is true, you use arsenicum album and you give 200 potency, oh my God, I will be poisoned. Hydrocyanic acid, we use hydrocyanic acid. You can imagine somebody imagining that if I take a potency, it may have the same effect as the real poison. So what he was saying actually was that the potency had the same effect, causing structural changes, damages in the living organism. It was a crazy idea altogether. If that was true, anyhow, we would have proved homeopathy any time. You say, okay, I'll poison you with arsenicum 200. Take the arsenicum 200 and poison you. On the contrary, the symptoms which are caused by the poison are actually eliminated by the high potency. It's the opposite. So I told them, you can poison your cells with Apis mellifica and give a high potency of Apis and prevent from being degranulated. Prevent them from being degranulated because they are sick now with a poison. And they have not completely died. Okay, give the high potency, and then high potency will prevent degranulation. Otherwise, it is totally crazy to think that we can give lachesis and all the poisons of the and create the same effect as the real poison. But yet, a lot of homeopaths, even today, not knowing exactly what's happening, believe, first of all, that Benveniste was right, the experiment was, proved homeopathy. Actually, all the attacks we receive is because of such experiments, which were proven to be false. And you cannot base your arguments in favor of homeopathy in a wrong experiment. That was totally wrong. You understand the implications of even thinking or discussing about the possibility of the Benveniste experiment is a correct experiment. It was a wrong experiment. Now what happened? Several years later, a group of the Ennis group, they call it, they said, we found out that the experiment of Benveniste was correct. So this time, instead of Nature, the BBC took the initiative and they said, okay, if you believe that this experiment was really correct, we will film what you found, your findings, and we'll tell to the world homeopathy is correct. So this group of 4 scientists agreed to do the experiment. 10 years later, after all this, and of course, the BBC called again Mr. Randi and said, okay, you go there and see that nothing, no trick will take place, will show us some. Mr. Randi was there, went there. They could not show anything, of course. And the BBC came with, in the Horizon program, some of you may seen this program. Has anybody seen this program? Horizon program, Horizon with the homeopathy, yeah. You remember what they said in the end? Homeopathy is rubbish. And you may wait for another 100 years before we talk again. I was mad. I wrote a letter to the editor and I said, well, this experiment on which you accuse homeopathy was a wrong experiment from its conception. And I have denounced this experiment from the very beginning. But you want to present that this experiment, it was an experiment which never proved homeopathy in spite of claiming that proved homeopathy. And you want to ridicule homeopathy, etc. We had a kind of correspondence with the editor, Mr. Barrett, and Williams, I think, was the name of the editor of the Horizon program. He wrote, if what you say is true, we have to rewrite science. I say, yes, you may rewrite science. Wait, you rewrite. You will understand a few things about science later on. So we had a big correspondence, etc. And the fact is that from this correspondence, some of the skeptics, they came to me and they said, you claim that high potencies have an effect. I said, yes. Can you prove that potencies have an effect on the human organism? I said, yes, I can prove. He said, do you agree to do an experiment with us, the skeptics, and yourself with a group? I said, yes. He says, okay. We start writing the protocol for such an experiment. The skeptics found 5 very reputed scientists together with me that we wrote a protocol for proving high potencies. And there were papers signed, and who was the head of the skeptics? You can imagine. It was Mr. Randi. Mr. Randi, who was signing the agreements with us, because he had put in his website that if anybody proves the high potencies action, he will get $1 million. $1 million. I said, I want this million. I want this million. For 2 years, we write the protocol to make it as perfect as possible, that there is no possibility that we can cheat under no circumstances. And then the next problem was to find a hospital on which to do the experiment, because we needed a hospital to do an experiment with human beings, right? And I put all my influence upon the political influence I had in order to have a hospital, a public hospital. And finally, we find a public hospital to accept, with their scientific committee deciding, etc., etc. It's a lot of work. We found the hospital. We are ready, and the hospital is the municipality hospital of Athens. And I said to them, we found the hospital, we have to start immediately, because the man who is the major, the woman rather, who was the major was my friend, and ordered the hospital to accept to do the experiment. She will go out of office in 1 year, because new elections, and we knew who is going to be the new mayor of Athens was a medical doctor. I said, we have to start. Once we start, there is no way to stop us. Please start. After a lot of these correspondences, we are in the 5th year, 4.5 years now trying. We receive a letter, we say we cannot start. Why? Because Mr. Randi is ill and cannot come to Athens. I said, for God's sake, we have to start. What is the problem? Mr. Randi is ill. I said, we have to start until next June, because from there starts the new mayor. It starts on September. We have at least 3 months to have started the experiment. We receive a letter, Mr. Randi is sick and most probably will be sick until the 10th of July. I said, oh my God, this is beyond. I wrote letters, angry letters, of course, etc. No, that's it. Mr. Randi can come after 10th of July, where his energy will be good. I said, okay. Then what happens? We had elections in Athens. The new mayor was the medical doctor we knew. We had no influence on this medical doctor who was against homeopathy, actually. Anyhow, I said, okay, I will try to influence this medical doctor, the mayor. And I put again all the people I have treated on the government, I put them speaking to the mayor to say, you accept, to give an order to the hospital to accept and to continue. They pressurize. And eventually, all things, the committee, which has changed already, the president of the hospital is persuaded, the committee is persuaded, everything is correct. Some of the skeptics are here, upstairs. We are finalizing the last details of the experiment. And suddenly, sorry, but they bother me. Go here. The last, we are here, the skeptics, the skeptics together with my team. We are arranging for the last arrangements. Because you have been thinking, for instance, I'll tell you, the last word it was, that a robot could make the selection. So no human will be involved in who takes the remedy, the potency, and who takes the placebo. 50-50 will be there. 50 people will take the remedy and 50% will take the placebo. And we had to point out that this and this and this and this and that person got the potency. That's all. Not they were cured or not. We had agreed that we will be able to spot who had taken the remedies in potencies. That's all. Which was very easy, actually, because we would give repeated doses of 30. We had agreed on 30 potency, repeated doses, and some of the people will show some provings, of course. And some of them, they will be cured. Some will show some provings, etc. We had a whole strategy how to spot these people. We had to spot 50 people, 50, that they have taken the remedy. We could have seen as many as we like, but for 50 people, we could say, they have taken, these 50 have taken the remedy. If we were correct in the 70%, we get the 1 million. It's fine. We are starting, within 2 more months, we'll start. At this moment, Mr. Randi sends a letter saying, because George Vithulkas is an aggressive individual, I want to start the process all over again. Not only that, but you do it first yourselves, see that it is really active, and then we repeat it. That means 5 years of battles, of spending hours, spending energy. He just threw it out. I said, but you have signed. You have signed it. You have said, I agree with all these conditions. Now suddenly, from now on, the statements are, if you go to our website, www.vithulkas.com, and you put Randy, and you see the story, you will see the story. You will see some of the letters, the actual letters that they were transpired. So this experiment was the continuation of the Benveniste stupidity. The Benveniste, I don't want to say that he did it on purpose, because that would be absolutely stupid. But his ambition to get the Nobel Prize, or what you thought, breaking the frontiers of science with an experiment proving hypotheses in such a way. It was a terrible mistake, and you should denounce, when you speak, you should denounce this experiment as a false experiment. We know the experiment was a false experiment. You cannot base your attack against homeopathy on an experiment that had no credibility. So all these fightings, of course, you may think, poor George. Yes, that is true. Except of all other things, I had to do all this in order to save the name of homeopathy.